Most Reverend Jeffrey Grob served as an auxiliary bishop for the Archdiocese of Chicago from 2020 until 2024 and was appointed Archbishop of Milwaukee by Pope Francis on November 4th, 2024. Go, Father Burns.
Checks in the mail.
I already gave him one. All right. He holds a doctorate in canon law and philosophy. His doctoral thesis in canon law was a comparative study of the 1614 and 1998 versions of the rite of exorcism.
Got one wall on it.
Now they're really looking forward to what you're going to have to say. Anyway, his talk today is The Wounding of Lies. Please welcome Archbishop Jeffrey Grob.
Just what you wanted to know, our family history. Yeah. That's the punishment you get for spending an afternoon here at Mundelein. Thank you for the opportunity to spend about an hour with you this afternoon and also to be able to celebrate the Eucharist together at 5 o'clock. It's a privilege for me. It's nice I haven't been back to these grounds since I packed up and went north. So I was briefly over at the office across the way and stuff. So in some ways it feels like 100 years ago and how time passes. Today for me is 102 days since I've been the Archbishop of Milwaukee. Not that I'm counting or anything. I was thinking about writing a book. You know, everybody's the first 100 days. But as the Archbishop of Milwaukee this morning, I had the privilege of ordaining 6 transitional deacons. So something of which to be greatly proud of. Whenever you get the call from the nuncio, you always wonder, okay, where? And then you start to sweat. Well, I mean, quick sidebar, and I promise I'll get on to the important stuff, but all this craziness. But, you always get nervous wondering when a conversation starts with 2 questions. Are you alone? And are you sitting down? That's literally how the nuncio starts most conversations. Think, this is going to be a nice chat about the weather, I'm guessing, right? Kind of thing. But anyway, of all the places that God in his providence could have set me, I feel very fortunate to be back in Wisconsin because I'm from a small town just west of Madison called Cross Plains. Anywho, 2, I would say, disclaimers or qualifiers. The context of the materials that I'm going to share are seen through my work for 20 years as the chief exorcist for the Archdiocese of Chicago. Because I thought I was being very crafty when I was at St. Paul University, Ottawa, and asked to do a doctorate in canon law. I didn't want to write on anything in marriage law because I didn't think there was anything left to write about marriage law, but that's a sidebar. And so with great wisdom, reader or professor that I wanted to have as the director, he said, the rite of exorcism was just revised. No one's written about it, so it's an easy, wide open topic, right? That's the kind of thing you want. Who are you gonna, you don't have to debate with anybody. You don't have to defend anything. You can just write, which I did. Now, those things can come back and bite you. Because when I came back to Chicago then after finishing my studies, Cardinal George of happy memory, and he gets that a lot when I say that. I said, well, you're a natural. In a sense, you can assist the the priest said I was in the position, and so that I didn't think that went through. But anyway, so but just as foundational. So in a sense, the materials I share are from that perspective, just to help you get a sense of why I'm speaking the way I'm speaking. That's the context out of which I'm speaking, and also as much. I want you to use this, and maybe you have been using all of the talks as much a little bit of a reflection time. I want this as much to be for yourself personally, selfishly, to be able to go within yourselves. But I'm guessing some of that's already taking place just in some of the other talks. That's the benefit of just kind of parachuting into a conference, not knowing what was said before or not what's going to be said after. So if there's repetition, I apologize for that as well. But hopefully the repetition, if there is, will be a reinforcement of the important things or things that really deserve focus. But so use this time for yourself as we go into it. And as Jeff already said, and boy, by the way, we both spelled Jeffrey the correct way, R-E-Y, not E-R-Y, but it's a sidebar. So a little levity, if you don't mind. Remember the topic is the wounding of lies. So a guy is driving around the backwoods of Tennessee. Anybody here from Tennessee? So we go, that's a few. That's it. I want to be respectful. Or not be met in the alley. Anyway, a guy was driving around the backwoods of Tennessee, and he sees a sign in front of a broken down old farmhouse. Talking dog for sale. Have you heard this? He rings the bell, and the owner appears and tells him that the dog's in the backyard. The guy goes into the backyard and sees a nice-looking Labrador retriever just sitting there, all proud as punch. "You talk?" he asks the dog. "Yep." The lab replies. After the guy recovers from the shock of actually hearing a dog speak, he says, "So, what's your story?" The lab looks up and says, "Well, I discovered that I could talk when I was pretty young. I'm a patriotic Southern dog, and I wanted to help my country. So I told the CIA of my ability. So in no time at all, they had me jetting around the country, from country to country, sitting in rooms with spies and world leaders, because who figures that the dog could listen and talk, that he'd be eavesdropping? I was one of their most valuable spies for years. But the jetting around really tired me out. I knew I wasn't getting any younger, so I decided to settle down. I signed up for a job at the airport to do some undercover security, wandering around near suspicious characters, sniffing a few packages, and just listening in on conversations. I uncovered some incredible stuff and was awarded a bunch of medals. I got married, had a mess of puppies, and now I'm just retired. The guy is befuddled and overwhelmed. He goes back in and he asks the owner, "What do you want for the dog?" $10. $10. $10? Are you kidding? This dog is amazing. Why on earth are you selling him so cheap? He said, "Because he's a liar. None of that stuff he told you is true." Just want to get the blood flowing a little this afternoon. It's 3:10 in the afternoon, and before you go into a complete coma state, I want to fish you back out of there. Now juxtaposed, God himself will set me free from the hunter's snare, from those who would trap me with lying words, and from the hunter's snare. My question, what are you carrying around in your body, your heart, your spirit, rent-free? It's a popular question asked in 12-step program. They say, what are you carrying around in your head rent-free? But we can do that in lots of places, not just our heads. We can do it in our hearts, in our beings, in our souls. What is the source of your greatest brokenness? No public confessions, no show of hands. Have you checked in lately with what that might be? And how did you come to be in that particular state? My experience in very specialized ministry is that it never happens overnight. I use the silly image of an onion. Layer upon layer upon layer, things get built up. We know that's life, isn't it? The things that happen in personal lives and family systems, I'm sure it doesn't happen in religious life or in religious structures. Everybody gets along and loves each other. Every house is happy and perfect. Lie to me, please, lie to me. But what about you personally? What's going on? Might these be components of what could be called spiritual post-traumatic stress disorder? We know what happens physically. We know what happens emotionally. I don't doubt it can happen spiritually too, given what can take place in religious settings. Oh, wow. In parish settings, in community settings. Things that we think ought not happen in the church, but we know have. How do we call them and name them for what they are? If it's not called out, it remains in the darkness. And in the darkness, it has power. Bring it into the light, however you do that. So, the topic, the wounding of lies. I want to start with wounds, and I'm guessing, and just that's why I asked that this image be put back up here. I'm guessing that you have been talking a bit in different ways about wounds, but here's my take on it, for what it's worth. When Jesus appears post-resurrection to his disciples in Luke's Gospel, chapter 24, verses 36 and following, they're rightly shocked at his unpredictable presence. Following his death and fearing persecution, Jesus' followers were hiding. They were afraid to appear. Even if you think of the wonderful gospel from this morning, all these different appearances all rolled up in Mark. Only Mark can pull them all together. Mary Magdalene, the one out of whom he cast 7 demons. He sends the woman first. Go tell them what you see. They don't believe. Then we've got these 2 fellows walking somewhere in the country. Are they tapped into the Emmaus story? Did they have their eyes open and their hearts set on fire? Well, they were sent too. But they didn't believe. So Jesus himself has to go, has to show up. And not only chastise them for their unbelief, that's one piece of it. But what's the other piece? Hardness of heart. And that just doesn't happen overnight. Heart is not turned to stone overnight. Flesh does not become something morbidly solid overnight. It happens with time. So clarifying that he is not an apparition or a phantom, Jesus confirms his identity through what? Right there. Put your finger in there. What do you find? The hands, the feet. Fish around a bit. You're going to find yourself. His hands, his feet, his side, they still bore the marks of crucifixion. eating fish and instructing the disciples, Jesus blesses them and is taken into heaven before their eyes. At no point, to our knowledge, are we told that these wounds are eliminated. At no point, either at following the crucifixion, on Easter, up to the time of the ascension, his departure and return to the Father's house. Even there's allusions in the book of Revelation, right? The one that bore the marks of slaughter. Despite a new form, Jesus bore the wounds of his experiences on earth. The wounds that caused his suffering during the Passion and confirmed his identity before the disciples were part of the Jesus who ascended to the Father. The importance of these wounds, his wounds, cannot be summarily dismissed. It's not an accident. It's not an oops on the Father's part. Oh, we should have erased those. Let's clean them up. Like we do with however we represent our saints. All very neat. Even the crucified, all very neat. Very sterile. But that ain't life. At least I'm guessing not the life that most of us live. The experiences, the people we encounter, the people we're in ministry with or for. Life's messy. So it is. Recall also John's Gospel, chapter 20, verses 19 to 31. The encounter between Jesus and Thomas, following Thomas's initial absence. In fact, it's our gospel this weekend. Be listening to it in a couple of hours on this Divine Mercy weekend, Sunday. Jesus does not rely on his appearance, these showing up as he's done all week long, which are certainly nice, but allows the disciples to confirm his identity through the close examination of his wounds. Put your finger here and see my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. These moments in both the gospel accounts that I just referred to highlight the importance of wounds for the confirmation of one's identity. Did you hear me right? Yeah. Wounds can identify us. In fact, the importance of the wounds of Christ in the appearance narratives may guide us towards a deeper understanding of the transformative potential of our wounds. And I'm guessing you've been talking a bit about that already. However, the problem enters in when our wounds remain unhealed. They continue to fester, lie hidden, unattended, do not become transformative. That's what's key. And that's where the darkness enters in. Generally speaking, if he has a ranking, I don't know if the evil one has a ranking of his favorites, God only knows. Well, God does know, but the evil one many times gains hold of individuals, or at least gets a grasp on them in their unhealed wounds. What's going on there? People are stuck. People aren't living. They're bound to a place, a moment, a person. They're frozen in time, and they're not free. That's it. Unhealed wounds are bondage. And these may not be necessarily physical wounds. They can be. for some people because of scarring physically. They can be scarring, deformities, mutilations. Because they can lead to deeper things, or how a person is seen or treated or called. So physical wounds, on a very basic level, they have a potential. But going deeper, certainly emotional wounds and psychological wounds can bring about the wounding of the spiritual self. And just so you know, and you may be aware, and the exorcist in his training is trained as a skeptic. He should be. The presumption is that there is some natural organic explanation for what's going on. That's your starting point. Is there a physical issue, a physical problem as far as health is concerned? Overactive thyroid. Something as seemingly simple as a urinary tract infection can make people act in all kinds of strange ways. It ain't the devil. Psychological issues and anomalies. Schizophrenia, bipolar, any number of mental health issues. Again, there's something organic, some kind of imbalance, and the potential for healing through psychotropic drugs, whatever the case may be. But then there can be something more. But it's always the matter of discernment. And that's so important, in your own life. As you sit with yourself, as you sit within, as you pray, as you discern in your own life, whatever you're doing, it's going to the feet of the Holy Spirit to ask you to receive help. But always remember that the darkness needs a hook onto which to hang its hat. And the wounds that exist within individuals can provide a very, very rich soil. And certainly, wounds can be created by any result of any number of circumstances. Family of origin issues. Again, reflect within your own hearts, your own experiences, or perhaps people you're dealing with, working with, praying with, counseling, whatever the relationships that you may have. If your slate is good and things are clipping along, praise God. But maybe others who are working with you, fellow community members, fellow religious, whatever. But certainly family of origin issues, disordered relationships, pattern of sinfulness. Again, not that there's any dysfunction in religious life or community structures, but I just put that out there. I'll let you ponder that yourself. Dare I say abuses of power? God knows that's never happened in the church. But how do we look at all of those things? Because what we need is truth. We don't need to gloss over. We don't need to put under the carpet. We need to speak truth into all of these things because His truth is light. And so it's an ongoing journey for all of us. Stepping in as a new archbishop, I was very happy. I had one county to tend to, and as an auxiliary bishop in Chicago, now I've got 10. You can multiply the problem now. But it's wherever we find ourselves, there are people that are in such deep need of healing. Of course, and more people than we would like to know are directly involved with the occult. Now more than ever. It's not the games of Harry Potter. These are real things. But the wounds, the trauma, the kinds of things as you reflect within your own life, things that have resulted in woundedness. They talk about trauma or abuse, a trauma of a person's life, something that perhaps as you reflect within yourself or somebody you know that they've experienced, not something that they themselves did, but something that they witnessed, some kind of traumatic event. Anything from coming across an accident, something deadly, something where death was involved, or accident, suicide, all kinds of different things. They can cause a wounding, right? They cast a collection of memories. They can become a form of bondage, abuse. We can spend an hour talking about all of the issues pertaining to abuse, be it psychological abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, verbal abuse, sexual abuse, all within a ranking of degrees in each category, and how all of those things happen in people's lives, the degrees, the extent, things that maybe are over, things that are still going on, all of which have the potential. They create the condition for the possibility of the darkness in people's lives to gain hold. Living in a world of dark emotions, which can result of being a victim of abuse, anger, resentment, rage, retaliation, bitterness. I mean, the hope in all of these situations is that if necessary yourself, if someone with whom you're working within your own family, whatever, there's counseling, There's means of healing, there's spiritual direction, there's so many things. There's no eraser. Just like wounds weren't erased, but they have the potential for a growing edge. But if lost in the world of dark emotions, again, the person becomes entrapped. They become that hook that can so easily be the source of darkness in people's lives. And coupled with that, in my own experience over the years of ministry and as exorcist, two of the evil one's favorite tools, as I see them, are isolation and fear. The things that happen in people's lives, the things that isolate an individual, and I do not doubt, I know it happens in rectories. I'm guessing it also can happen in religious life, even in the midst of living in a community. How isolated someone can become, or they isolate themselves because of things happening that cut themselves off from the life of the community. Oh, they're physically present, but that's about it. They go through the motions, but that's about it. And whatever is going on to bring them to that point, and how as fellow community members to draw them into the light. Maybe a whole lot of healing required. Who knows? But just even the sensitivity to be attuned to be able to reach out to. And fear. I mean, let's face it, when's the last time you saw a fear walking down the street? What attacks the mind? And there are legitimate phobias, there are legitimate diagnosable. Again, all of these things is the balance, Again, going back to the skeptic, physical, psychological, or something more, or coupled together. Those are the difficult cases. If any of you have heard me talk before, first of all, I apologize. But if you've heard me speak before, everywhere I've ministered in probably about the last 30 years, wherever my desk is set up, now it's at the Pastoral Center on South Lake Drive in St. Francis, Wisconsin. I've got a figurine that stands about yay tall of Jacob Marley. Remember our friend Jacob Marley, Christmas Carol? He was the business partner of Ebenezer Scrooge. Jim Shore, popular artist who's done lots of caricatures, images, statuary, and all those kinds of things. He did this great image of Jacob Marley, stands about this tall, at least the one I have. I wish I could find a life-size one. I'd put it in the corner of my office. And it's, I'm sure people kind of walk in and look quizzically and say, oh, the Archbishop of Milwaukee has got a statue of Jacob Marley on his desk. Yeah, now I'm kind of thinking, okay, maybe he needs some therapy, which is not wrong, but it's a mirror for me, because as I'm sitting at my desk, the days I'm sitting at my desk, Jacob and I look at each other. And Jacob is that tall and a little dressed appropriately of the Victorian age. And he's got the cowl wrapped around his head as you would in death to keep the mouth shut when somebody died. And he's got all of these chains hanging off of him. And just like if you ever seen any of the versions of the movie, the little boxes and packages and stuff, and he's bound. He's bound. For me, it's my reflection. I offer it to you as your reflection. It doesn't have to be Jacob Marley, but find something. If it's not Jacob Marley, find something for your own reflection that you look at on a daily basis. I look at Jacob Marley and I reflect regularly. What are the things that are binding me? What are the things that I've shackled myself by and with? What are the things that I'm dragging along with me? No one's holding a gun to my head. It's the things that I choose to bring along with me, to drag along with me, to bind myself. Again, it doesn't have to be Jacob. Find something that works. Jacob works for me. We get along just fine. He nudges me more than I nudge him, I think. But we all have those things, don't we? Things from the past, resentments, grudges, old baggage, maybe new baggage. Maybe it's the new archbishop. Who knows? Some pain in my life. But what are they? Go about identifying them. Sit within yourself with the help of the Holy Spirit. Discern. Ask yourself, isn't it time to set it down? Put it aside. Because we do it to ourselves. Let's be honest. If any of those things that cause the baggage and cause the wounds and the grudges and the pain, let's be honest, do you think that they're even still thinking about us? Probably not. They've gone on, they're gone, they've caused their tsunami and left. I love the base of the statue. It just has 3 words on it. Link by link. Isn't that the way we forge chains? Same is true in our lives. It didn't happen with the whole chain. One at a time. We craft the chain. We bind ourselves. Something to ponder, if you will. Now, shifting directly to then lies themselves. Darkness, as I've already said, has the ability to live in wounds. And one of the greatest wounds, I believe, is caused by lies. Recall John's Gospel, chapter 8, verse 44. Jesus is debating with a group of the Jews, and he says, "You belong to your father, the devil, and you willingly carry out your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in truth because there is no truth in him. When he tells a lie, he speaks in character because he's a liar and the father of lies." That's quite a verse, isn't it? Allow me to repeat it. John 8:44. You belong to your father the devil, and you willingly carry out your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning. Well, we know that. Go back to Genesis. And does not stand in truth. Oh, go ahead. It's just a piece of fruit. What? You're going to die? Oh, you're not going to die. You're going to become like gods. And they ate the fruit. And they did die. A murderer from the beginning. He does not stand in truth because there is no truth in him. When he tells a lie, he speaks in character. What a judgment. What a condemnation. Because he's a liar and the father of lies. Some years ago, he was a deacon of the archdiocese, but now is in public life, Keith Strom. And I was skeptical about referencing it, but the book he wrote is still, I think, phenomenal. So it's one of those difficult things. He's no longer in ministry. I guess he's in the public sector, not in ministerial sector, at least at this point. But he wrote an incredible book called The 10 Biggest Lies of the Enemy. Not sure if you've ever seen it. And I'm guessing it's still readily available. So I don't want to cause too much agita by referencing it. But there's a lot of truth in this work. So it's called The 10 Biggest Lies of the Enemy and How to Combat Them. Early in the work, Mr. Strom writes, lies have a particular ability to capture our attention. Whether someone has lied to us about a particular situation, lied about us to someone else, or whether we have, perhaps with good intentions, lied ourselves, we have all experienced the power of lies. Lies can influence how we see and react to others, how we interpret the world around us, and how we understand our own identity. And it's that third piece that I want to focus on, that lies can influence how we understand our own identity. This is an identity issue, an identity question. It goes to the very core of who I am. It's my hope to call out and to address the lies that have distorted our identity as daughters and sons of a loving God. And I'm not simply referring to just any lie. There's lots of lies. We've got a government. Take that any way you want to. In particular, I wish to focus on when a specific lie is told to a person about that person. Depending upon the nature of the lie or the result of the event that occurred, the person can take that lie, that untruth, into himself or herself. They can absorb it, if you will, especially if they're told that lie again and again and again. How often we see that in abusive relationships, huh? A spouse is told, You're miserable. You're this, you're that. A parent tells to a child, you're never going to amount to anything. You're always going to be a failure. God forbid a religious authority tells that to a member of a community. But I'm sure it can happen. Just human nature being human nature. But it's when these things touch the heart, the identity of the person, and they absorb it. This is where the problem exists. This is where the darkness can set in. Because where normally, let me stop back. He said, with time, the person begins to identify and to identify him or herself as a result by the lie. It becomes some portion of who they are, their identity. And where normally the spirit of truth is leading and shaping the person, now the lie takes the upper hand, devaluing the person, diminishing his or her integrity, stripping away their dignity. And a true darkness can attach itself to the person, and the person can allow themselves to become equivalent to the untruth. It's absolutely crippling. Not just emotionally, but what this does to the spirit. The result is exactly that, the deadening of the person's spirit, crippling their movement and grace, thus creating an entrenchment and a spiritual inertia. How did that quote go again? He does not stand in the truth because there's no truth in him. When he tells a lie, he speaks in character. And so, the homework to reflect within yourselves, and, God willing, to reflect with others, exactly this. Are there woundings? God knows most all of us have them in various shapes, colors, sizes, flavors, whatever. But looking specifically of those that are born of lies. Because ultimately, in order for the person to be free, they must renounce the lie. If they've identified themselves with it, if they believe that's who they are, that's what they deserve, that's their state in life because of who they are, or where they've come from, or what they've done, whatever, unless they can renounce, if they can separate it from themselves, they can somehow have someone help them to objectify it, they have to renounce it. Otherwise, it will always be part of who they are. But it's tough work. Because depending upon how long someone has lived or associated with or defined themselves as, it runs incredibly deep. Something to take to prayer, to reflect in your own life, but also to put in your spiritual toolbox, if you will, depending upon with whom you work. Those who are working with, novices, those who are coming into religious life, those who are going into, so much work is being done in seminary faculties as candidates come in for priesthood. The world in which we live, the moment in which we're living, we can't presume, the stability of faith life, prayer life, home life, all of those kinds of things. We live at a curious time. But anything that takes us off center of the truth is the problem. However that happens, because that's exactly what the darkness wants to do. When we're oriented towards the truth, I tend to focus on the crucified, but certainly you've got the risen Christ here, wherever you want to. If our orientation, if we're centered in Him, it's not a get out of jail free card, we know that. But we have a trajectory. The darkness is always at work trying to disorient us, to shift our focus left or right. And that's not a political statement. Just simply to take our focus off of Him. And that can happen in so very many ways. I did a happy dance when I found out from Jeff that this was going to be the subject of this conference. Because clearly, in my own 20 years of ministry as exorcist, the volume of people that have come forward because they're bound in their wounds. And not to say that that automatically presumes someone is demonically afflicted, but they're bound nonetheless and they're not free, and the potential exists. So to have this opportunity, and especially in religious life, for the renewal of religious life, I personally am so deeply grateful for all of you, for your witness, for your continued witness, for your courage to live in the world which can be so dark in so many ways, and to continue to stand for the truth that is Jesus Christ. It's not getting any easier. No one ever said it would. But as we stand together, how can we work side by side to help each other? To bring the best healing to ourselves and to those of our communities, be they religious, our own religious communities, faith communities, whatever they are. Consecrated life, whatever the format. Because it's in that we have our true strength. In Him. And His longing above all else is that we're free. He doesn't want us bound by anything. And so I leave you with that.